What is meant by purification of all worldly seeds? It is to be known that there are three types, in brief. 1. Attainment of samadhi. 2. Completeness of samadhi. And 3. Mastery of samadhi. Within this, there are initially 20 types of dharma that are countered when samadhi is attained. These can cause superior samadhi not to be attained. What are these 20? 1. The fault of having a practice companion who does not delight in severing sensual desire. 2. Although one's companion is virtuous, but one's teacher who teaches the skillful means for cultivating concentration has faults. That is, he teaches the contrary methods. 3. Although one's teacher is virtuous, but with respect to the skillful means for cultivating concentration that are taught, the listener has weak and low interest, and thus has the fault of not receiving the teachings due to distracted mind. 4. Although the listener has interest and lends ear to listening, but his mental faculties are dull, and his wisdom of realization is inferior, thus has the fault of not receiving the teachings. 5. Although one has wisdom and virtue, but one craves for sensual pleasures, thus has the fault of excessive wants of material support or reverence. 6. Being frequently depressed and difficult to support or satisfy, thus has the fault of discontentment. 7. Hence, due to such aggravating factors, there is the fault of having much matters and chores. 8. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of relinquishment of intensified effort due to indolence and laziness. 9. Despite the absence of such fault, the fault of being hindered by various factors arises. 10. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of being unable to endure the suffering due to cold, heat, etc. 11. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of being unable to accept teachings due to one's arrogance and ill will. 12. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of having distorted reflection with respect to the teachings. 13. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of not remembering or recalling the teachings. 14. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of residing with lay and monastics in a non-conducive manner. 15. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of residing in an environment with 5 corresponding faults. Please see the stage of Shravaka regarding the definition of environment with 5 corresponding faults. 16. Despite the absence of such fault, although one stays in a secluded place, one has the fault of improper pondering and thinking due to unguarded senses. 17. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of the sluggishness of body causing one to be unable to practice. This is due to imbalanced food consumption. 18. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the arising of accompanying defilement of excessive sleeping due to one's nature to do so. 19. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of non-delight with regards to the inner stilling and seclusion of the mind due to the lack of prior cultivation and practice of samatha. And 20. Despite the absence of such fault, there is the fault of non-delight with respect to the wisdom-strengthening dharma, the direct seeing in accordance to reality through vipassana. This is due to the lack of prior cultivation and practice of vipassana. Thus are the 20 types of dharma that fall under the qualities of samatha and vipassana. They are to be countered in order to attain single-pointedness.